What is going on, Canes fans? We are here with two Canes alumni, some special guests. We have got with us Chavez Grant and Eric Winston. Thank you guys for joining the show the day before our first game of the season. Thank you guys.
For sure, man. You're welcome. Appreciate it.
I always love having both you guys on the show here, and this is my first chance to have both you guys on at the same time, I believe. So this is just, honestly, this is fantastic for me, guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, man.
Well, start off here with Chavez. Let's start off with you here. Mario Cristobal. We're coming into year 2. What is in your mind that sticks out of the utmost importance of year 2 for Mario Cristobal?
I think year 2 is I think he's really got to get his staff like solidified and like what's going to be our identity. So, and especially with TVD, especially like that first year he had, and then the second year with Josh Gaddis, which was a tough fit. But I think he's really got to solidify what his identity is. His identity was always like a tough offensive line. Yep. That interior strength, being able to run the ball when he needed to. He went up to Oregon and got that established. So I think he's got to really establish that in year 2 and really just start to, like I keep saying, like really start to get that identity in place, for what we know Cristobal to be. You know what I mean? So he's got a lot of different pieces. He's bringing in different pieces of the staff, but at the same time, like as a head coach, like what is your identity? So I think they really got to figure that out. Like if you look at someone like a Nick Saban, what his identity is. The defense is going to be top notch. It doesn't matter who the D coordinator is. They rotate every few years, but that's his identity. And so I think Cristobal's really got to solidify that.
Eric, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think, kind of just building on top of that, I think anytime in a second year, especially in what I would always have called is a bit of a rebuild or a retool, et cetera. We talked about this last year as everybody like, oh, he's back. And I was like, pump the brakes, man. Like there's a long way to go here.
Yeah,
and listen, I think, nobody liked the way the season went last year. I think it was a combination, quite frankly, of maybe some mismatched staff, I think, to be as blunt as possible. But I also think the breaks really didn't come that way. There was a lot of injuries at the quarterback position. I don't think some people developed maybe I think the way everyone was hoping they would. I think some of the losses, quite frankly, to the NFL were a little bit more extreme than I think a lot of people thought they'd be. So I think last year was considered by most as a even worse year by what I think, normal expectations would have been. Even mine, I thought, well, I was pretty mellow about what the possibilities were. And that was even surpassed by, I guess probably some lackluster play. So anytime you have this, I think, and I think you've seen this is, they've definitely cleared house a bit. Right. And I think Chavez mentioned it of staff, identity, et cetera. Right. What are we going to be? What are we always going to be going forward? Who are we? Right. I think that's number one and that's at any level. Right. You look at the great high school teams, the great pro teams, the great college teams. You know what you're going to get year in, year out. The personnel might change, but you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
This year, though, being a little bit more tactical, a little bit more specific, you really want to see, in my opinion, the young players playing and getting better week to week, right? And I think we'll see that. I think they're going to play a lot of young players. They recruited well. That was the one thing, you knew was sort of Mario's thing, right? It was like, hey, no matter what happens, the dude's going to go out and go find some guy, right? Like that was Mario's thing, check the box, right? Like, so that was the box that got checked. Obviously with the transfer portal and the way NIL is there's like a whole other recruiting thing outside of high school now as well. That seems like that box got checked. So when I really think about kind of going into the season, I really look at this team and saying, okay, I want them to play good when they're supposed to be playing good. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're supposed to play well against the inferior teams. I want them to win the games that they're supposed to win. And maybe one or two are the ones that they're not supposed to win. Right. And I think if you combine that with sort of this acceleration towards November, I think this season is is a success, right? I'd love to tell you, right, I think we're going to whip off double-digit wins, and like this is going to be, this is going to be the coming out party, and we're going to have these freshmen that nobody knows about. Hey, that'd be great. But I think from just a completely sober standpoint, I really expect this team to be much more competitive on a week-to-week basis. I expect this team to be able to see the week-to-week difference, because I think there's going to be a lot of young guys getting a lot of playing time early on, and I think you'll see that difference as we get into later in September, of them just coming of age and how quickly you come of age when you play early. And that to me will be the big success, is that if we get towards the end of the season, you say, holy cow, the freshmen, the sophomores are 100 times better than they were at Labor Day. And we feel good. We go in and win a bowl game. And then all of a sudden you have another recruiting class. Now you kind of like zooming out from that big picture from a 2,000-foot standpoint, you're like, all right, we're on to something. Right. You come out and you lay another egg like we did last year. Now you're like kind of scrambling a little.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
So this is a bit of an inflection point. And I'm not saying you have to go in the ACC for it to be successful, but I do think you're going to have to see some tangible differences. And just to your point, your original point, Chavez, is like, hey, how are they playing? What are they doing? How are they doing it? And then from just a much more granular standpoint, who's playing well? Are they developing? And quite frankly, at the quarterback position, is Tyler Van Dyke look 100 times better than he did last year? And I think that will be kind of how, I think a lot of people will feel much better about the state of the U in middle of October if you can check some of those boxes.
A lot of the questions that I'm asked by Canes fans, especially now that we've gotten closer to the season, is about my opinion on the chances of us starting to show depth. Not exactly, Bill, it's year two. Like I try to tell them, year two, it's tough to formally just say, yes, we have absolutely built depth in year two. But I like to say that we should start to see the beginnings of some of that depth. Eric, is that something that you agree on?
This year, no. I just listen, you had a massive amount of turnover. Yeah. And the idea that you're going to hit on every single one of those guys is, I think, just frankly, probably just a fool's errand. Like you're not going to hit you're not going to bat 1,000, right? So, can you have the makings of a great starting lineup that's young? That's what I'm looking for. Depth is especially in college ball now. Depth is that's like an embarrassment of the riches at this point, because if you do have great depth at this point, you're going to lose them year to year. So if you got a great quarterback that's running behind Tyler Van Dyke, well, that guy's going to transfer now immediately than when he was. So this idea of depth, in a weird way, you're going to run into a college game, I think, over the long term that's a little bit more identical to the pro game, where there's not a lot of depth, right? Like you might catch a team every now and then that has some depth because they drafted well, but I don't think there's this idea that we're going to be able to roll 2-3 platoons in at any point. And I'm not talking about this year. I'm talking about 2 years from now if things go well. Because at the end of the day, again, like if you're a stud high school guy that comes to Miami and they're the best team in the country, and it's happening to Alabama all the time right now, it's like, and I can't play, well, hell, I'm going to go somewhere and play.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just the way it's going to be. So I just don't know that like this old school, and I say old school, I mean like 2 or 3 years ago, idea that like depth is like, great programs have depth. I think that was probably right. I think that was what you're shooting for. I don't know that that's really ever going to happen anymore. And sorry to cut you off, but I just depth sometimes is funny because you don't know you have it until you have to have it, right? Yeah. Like someone gets hurt. Oh shit, here we go. We're going to put this guy in. Let's see what happens. And then all of a sudden he's a good player. And you're like, oh, look how much depth we have. And it's like, oh, we kind of built it through the fire. I think sometimes you build depth when you don't even know it.
Right. And even on that point, a guy gets hurt and you put in this other guy and he balls out. Well, that's just his resume to transfer to next year. Because he's just going to say, well, I was sitting behind. They finally gave me a shot. I showed you guys what I can do. And I want to go. I mean, look at Jeff Garcia. I mean, he did the same thing with us. So, I think that, just like Eric said, I think he hit the nail right on the head. The idea of depth it doesn't exist anymore. I think guys are now, they're on 1 and 2 year deals. as he likened it to, the pro game. So, if a guy is highly recruited and he comes in and he has to sit a year, well, everybody knows that he's highly recruited. So next year they're going to come looking for him and they're going to tell him, hey, come play for us, and you'll play. So the depth part is it's kind of it's history now with the transfer portal.
The reason that I refer to it, and I guess I say as the startings of depth, is because I refer to it as young players who are behind some of the guys with more experience and who will ultimately get opportunities because we do have rotations and we do have injuries. So, I mean, guys will get chances.
Yeah, I would tell you, though,
that doesn't exist in its old fashioned, though.
I would tell you, though, that you're going to see that by early October. If it's there, if there's a freshman or a sophomore that can play, he is probably either going to be starting or he's going to be regularly in the lineup by that point. Because again, I just don't think that these folks are going to be playing a senior, and God bless them. Like this is not. I think this is just reality. I'm not speaking as seniors shouldn't be playing. Like I'm not that guy, but I just think of the state of where this program is. They're going to be skewing so hard towards younger players and developing younger players that if a younger player is capable of competing, you're going to know it immediately. Like you're going to know, by the 1st of October, if that young player ain't playing, it's because he's so far away at this point in the practices and everything else that they've shown that he can't compete. So to your point, I think you're going to see whether you want to call young players depth or whatever, even if there's an older player in front of him that's pretty good. I think even if he's not as good as the older player, but it's close, that guy will still be playing.
Yeah.
We're seeing it already with Nigel Kelly. He's already taken over the spot for Jafari Harvey. So, I mean, we're seeing the younger players already stepping in who have shown just in this offseason before even week 1 that they deserve those kind of snaps. So, absolutely. I agree there, yeah. I guess the way I presented that question wasn't the right way to present it, and I'm glad that you guys cleared it up a little more. Thank you. Do you guys believe now with this, Mario Cristobal is Mario Cristobal, Mario Cristobal is also a smart coach. He's a smart coach who learns. We went through some bumps and bruises last year. We saw what worked for TVD the year before. We saw what didn't work for him last year. Do you believe that we will go back to more of a spread offense, especially in the passing game?
Who do you want that to?
I think we will, because I think it more so fits TVD. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the year that we had, was it Rhett Lashley? Yeah, it was. He was letting him throw it around, and then we brought in Josh Gaddis, who was good for Michigan, but Michigan is a pro style run the ball type of offense. Yeah, and so it was a real transition for TVD that we clearly saw didn't work out, and then the injuries and everything like that. So I 100% think we're going to go back to that spread offense, even more so because that's just where the game has gone today. I mean, it's 4 wide, 5 wide. There are defenses now that their base defense is a nickel defense. So I think that defenses are changing the way that they defend these offenses, because everything is spread out. Everything is spread out, 4 or 5 receivers. They're throwing the ball all over the place, hurry up offense. So I absolutely see us going back in that direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's, listen, regardless of what the offensive coordinators, comfortability at, I think there's no doubt that Van Dyke is much more comfortable spreading the field and being able to see the defense that way. It's just there's no doubt that that's where he was best at. A little bit up tempo, shorten the reads down, keep the reads to one side of the field, make it simplify the game plan a little bit. Let's not overdo things. I think that's where his comfortability is, and then as the season goes on, you can build it. The one thing I'm super worried about is now this is 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. And for a young player, that is, especially a young quarterback, even at the NFL level, that is not a good sign, and it's not positive for development. There's so much going on in these offenses. It's so hard. The verbiage is switching. There's new verbiage. This means that. oh, Jet used to mean this, now it means this. Like it's hard for a veteran, believe me, I was there, a veteran NFL player to start flip-flopping things in your head and play at the speed you need to play it. And then at the quarterback position, for a 20-year-old now, again, your third offensive coordinator in 3 years, it's miserable. It really is. And so I really hope that these guys don't really try to put a square peg in a round hole. Like, get to what he's good at, get to what he's comfortable with, play to him, even if your long-term vision of the offense is slightly different than what this guy's is at. Like, this is what you have. Play to your players' strengths and go do that, right? And I think that will be there'll be just a much better outcome.
Speaking of opening things up, the defense as well. It sounds like we're going to be going to a kind of a modified 4-2-5 type of a defense here. I think that allows us to play in the new era against these new offenses much better, and I think it allows us to use our athletes much better. Chavez, how do you feel about moving to a 4-2-5 that's kind of a modified system where we do have some guys kind of roaming around at times as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said before, with TVD, I think that's just where the game is going. I think a lot of base defenses are not going to be nickel because everything is spread out, and even if they've got a tight end in, it's an athletic tight end. It's a Jimmy Graham type of tight end or Jason Kelsey, where it's like a hybrid type of guy. So I think everything now is going to be that nickel type of defense. And I think it allows us some flexibility, especially when you talk about bringing pressure and when you're talking about, going into man coverage. That allows us some more flexibility. So I just think that's where the game is going. I think it's something that you have to do. I think the days of three traditional linebackers, the Mike Sam and the Will, I think those days are over. Now it's all about, can you cover and can you pass rush? And so I just think it's a necessary evil that we have to do. I'm glad they're doing it, and I'm sure that they're seeing a lot of it in practice with the offense and TVD, because I'm pretty sure that they're spreading it out over there. So any game you watch, NFL, college, it's spread offense, it's hurry up, it's go go go. I was thinking about it a couple of days ago. When I first got to college, we used to play like 60 plays a game. Now it's like 90, 100 plays a game, but that's just the game. And that's
well, I also think though with the rule changes, though, with the clock change and rule changes, we're going to skew back to less plays. Right now that they're running, unless I missed,
they're going to run it a little bit more.
They're running the clock now on first downs outside of 2 minutes. That's going to eat up a lot more plays. I wouldn't, I'll be very curious of like how many they get in. But I actually think ball control will actually become a little bit more part of college football now, in that time of possession will actually be a useful stat, which quite frankly, obviously in the program, time of possession was always and it has been a useful stat, but like in the college game, it just has not been a useful stat because of quick strike offenses, hurry up offenses, all of that is just not a applicable stat to success. I actually think it will be, because if you can keep, you lessen the amount of possessions, you run the ball well, and you control passing game, which I would call, extension of the running game or vice versa. I think there's some interesting strategy to be had there. And I'll be very curious to see kind of the changes that coaches are making, whether the up-tempo offenses continue to be up-tempo offenses, or they're slowing down a little bit, or how they're playing this now, because I do think these rule changes will affect play calling. I also think it will affect really overall strategy of how teams play.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because now timeouts come into play.
Yeah.
So Eric here, I talked to you guys previously just a bit before we started the show, and I wanted to break down just some individual spots, some certain units that you guys are familiar playing with, and I'd like to get to the offensive line here, Eric, in a week one, just as a week one kind of approach thing, with the full off season and stuff like that. What would you like to see from this offensive line, especially the starters in this first week?
I always say first week, the big thing too here is I always kind of harken back to some of my professional days. There's no preseason games, right? And you can do all the scrimmages you want. You can do all the, we're going to dress up. We're going to pretend like we're running out of the tunnel. We're going to stay on the sidelines, the whole thing. What you really want to see is great operation, right? You want to see the plays getting in, the gun getting up, they're lining up correctly, they're running the right play, and they're repeating that. If you're out there looking at a team that can't get the play in, is taking delay of games, having to call timeouts, they're not ready to play, right? And as crazy as this sounds, week one of college, the team that is ready to do that, and this is why I think in week one, if you have a returning quarterback, which Tyler Van Dyke is, and you have some returning players on the operations side, especially on the offense, you're going to be way ahead of some teams. Even if there's great talent, it's different in the game. The communication's different. You can't hear as much. The coach can't scream from the sideline, even at practice, and you can't hear them. And so there's a big difference when it comes to this. So I think in college football, you want to see teams operating with efficiency and maturity. And I think that is what I want to see this offense, because even though the Van Dyke's back, you have a new OC, you have a lot of new faces, you have a new center, you have almost a whole new offensive line. You want to see this team blocking the right guys, running the right routes, getting the plays off on time, being crisp and attacking, right? And then we'll see what happens from there. But I really believe if you can see 4 quarters of that, I think there's going to be a lot of success to be had against an inferior opponent.
I agree completely. Chavez, want to kick it back over to you now with the DBs. Week one, what do you want to see out of this defensive back unit?
Yeah, it's more of what Eric said, and just to piggyback off what he said, like, in game one, when we go out there on defense and we line up and we see that the other team is like confused and they're trying to get the call in and they're taking timeouts and delay it, we're like, oh yeah, we got this. They're not ready, So he's absolutely right. What I would say and I think it's along the same lines of what Eric's saying, is the communication. I want to see the communication in the secondary. Yeah. So, with the secondary, if somebody motions across, a lot of times that changes the entire coverage. And so the first thing I look at is who's talking to who's looking at who. Is the nickel looking at the corner, or the safeties, are they communicating? And then what I also look at sometimes as well is, like, if someone catches a deep pass or they catch a touchdown, and sometimes they'll show like that kind of that bird's eye view shot. I'm looking at who does the corner look to, who does the safety look to, because a lot of times you'll see them look at each other and be like, yo, like where were you with it? So I don't want to see that. If you got beat, if it's man-to-man coverage, you got beat. If it's a communication issue, now that's a problem, because we've been practicing all summer. That means when somebody moves, somebody didn't talk. So that's what I want to see. I want to see the communication. I want to see those guys on the same page. I want to see guys, in the spots that they're supposed to be. It's really just about execution, and then you start to build on that. So but if you can't communicate, then you can't execute. So I think that's a little more intricate than what the typical football fan looks to see when they're watching the game. But I'm looking at those small things, man. When somebody motions or if they shift formations, I'm looking at who's talking, like who's looking to who, what are they saying, how they're realigning, how are they changing the coverage. So I would say that's what I'm looking for, more so the communication.
Chavez, week one here, jumping in against Miami of Ohio. What kind of importance can come, or what kind of confidence can come from winning a game like that with the coaches and our players? Where can they build off of a week one performance?
Well, yeah, I think the confidence comes from any kind of win, whether you're playing in an inferior opponent or, you're playing the number one team in the country. I mean, I won't say that beating the number one team in the country is the same as beating the Miami of Ohio, but a win is a win. What I mean? You want to know that the work you put in, what you've been practicing, what your coaches are calling, your players, you want to know that you're good enough to get the job done. So, it's a good momentum builder. You absolutely don't want a loss. Now, a loss won't crush the whole season, but it does start to call some things into question, especially when you're playing the Miami of Ohio. So, I think a win is necessary. I think it's needed. And I think that it'll take a lot of weight, even though it's one game. I think it'll take a lot of weight off the players. It'll get them to trust the process a little bit more, trust the coaching, trust the execution, trust the work that they put in. So, I mean, winning cures all. So, yeah, it's important.
Yeah. Eric, how you feeling about the week 1 matchup here, and in terms of its importance for the team and the staff going forward, getting the W?
Yeah, listen, I go back to that original comment of win the games you're supposed to, and some of the ones you're not, right? And this is the game that you're supposed to win, and whether they win it, 42-10 or 28-10, there is some style points here. I think anytime you're playing Miami of Ohio or you're playing someone in I don't, listen, Miami of Ohio's had some good teams, over the years, so you can't sleep on them. But it's one of those things like, you can't go out there and grind a 10-7 win and everybody be super excited about it, right? This ain't Patriots Dolphins where every win counts. It doesn't matter really kind of style, right? So I do think that there's a bit of some style points here, and again, I'm not that concerned. Once you cross 35 or 28, those are just add-ons, right? But there is a certain amount of how are they playing? How are they looking? Are they flying around? Is the energy better? Is the conditioning better? I think that's one part of it last year that I just think that takes a while. I don't know that they were great conditioned, and that's not a shot at Mario or anything. I don't know that they were that doesn't happen over a summer, right? That I was that's a building of muscle endurance that happens over a period of time that you're not gonna fly into, right? So I was lucky enough. I saw one practice this in August, and they just in that practice, I thought they looked better than they did the year before it. The year before, it was they were staggering around, and weren't flying around. It was this year they're much more flying around. They looked like there was more guys to put in the whole thing. So. I'll be very curious again, just on some of those little things, right? The scoreboard will be the scoreboard, but you got to win the games you're supposed to. This is one of those games you got to kind of win in a certain way that makes everybody feel good, and whether that's whether that's by 20 or 30, I don't know that it matters that much, depending on what kind of team you end up being. But I do hope that they look crisp, they look ready, they look mature. And that they're ready to play some bigger ACC games this year.
After a tough season last year, and with our rabid fan base, you guys know how our fan base is. They go at it, man. They're hungry. They're always hungry for success. Kind of looking outside of ourselves here, guys. But do you believe that 7 or 8 wins is enough to keep this rabid fan base happy going forward? Is that enough to show improvement after what we saw last season? Eric, I'll start with you on this one.
How many wins? I missed it. How many wins?
7 to 8 wins. Is that enough to keep this rabid fan base happy going forward?
Are we playing 13 this year or 12? I'm assuming we're playing 12. Yeah, I think I'm assuming we're playing 12.
Yeah, 12.
8-4. I think 8-4 is well within probability. I think if they shot 10, that's shooting the moon, in my opinion. If they somehow went 2, that is a bit absurd. I don't know. I think we might have lost my man here. I don't know. Are we still recording? I guess I'll just keep answering the question.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Now you're buffering on the other screen. That's pretty weird. No, listen. I think 10 is shooting the moon. I think 9 is probably highly successful and probably a little bit over. I think 8 is probable. I think 8 is probably the right mark, right? And I haven't gone through win, loss, win, loss, that kind of thing. But I just think from a big picture, 8-4, go win a bowl game, go to 9-4. That's if you're playing as many freshmen and sophomores, I'm expecting them to play. That is a good season. And I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer here, just from the usual Canes thing, but I just look at it. I'm trying to look at it from the most sober standpoint as we can. Again, you can strike lightning in a bottle. All of a sudden, you see a freshman just come onto the scene, and it's changes your team. That can always happen. And I do think we've recruited in a way for the first time in 15 years where you actually have a possibility of that happening. Of holy cow, we've got a kind of a difference maker type of young player. That said, I think 8 wins sounds right to me, just off the top of my head over 12 games. go win a bowl game, go feel good about yourself, go get another recruiting class. Now, this time next year, we're talking about a serious ACC, champion competitor, 10 wins, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When you said the 7 or 8 wins, my mind went straight to 8. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, the 7 and 8, but I think that makes a big difference. I think 8 and 4 is a major difference with, than 7 and 5. So I would 100% agree with Eric. I think 8 wins is the right place to be. I think it'll show a good improvement, from the 5 and 7. I don't think 7 wins would be enough to satisfy the fan base, but I think that one extra win, just like Eric said, with a bowl win, I think that'll keep us in the right place, and I think that'll keep us on the right path. So, yeah, I will 100% go with 8 wins and a bowl win.
And that's what I was going to just ask next, is about that importance of that bowl game. And both of you guys seem to think that's kind of the cherry on top for the season. So I'm going to take it that both of you guys say it's about time we win ourselves a bowl game. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's important, man. It's just like, even if it's prophylactic at times, it's important to win that bowl game. Feel good about yourself. Yep. It gives you something to talk about on the recruiting trail when you're trying to wrap up the class. And for this, especially here, it's about a story you're telling about the program you're building, right? And if you don't win the bowl game, then you're basically saying, it's a one-off, don't think about that, whatever. When you win the bowl game and go 9 and 4 instead of 8 and 5, now you're like, hey, we're an ascending team. Yep. We played all these young guys. You're going to come in and be part of all these young guys that are going to be the next national champions, right? Like that. It's just such a different story to tell, and I just think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, especially and again, like he said, if you go 8 and 4, you win a bowl game. Now you're 9 and 4 on the recruiting trail. Look, man, we're 1 win away from a double-digit win season. You know what I mean? So all that stuff makes a difference, man. Especially when the icing on the cake or the cherry on top is the bowl game. Yeah. I know of course you want to be an ACC championship and all that, but the bowl games are also on a big stage, and that's kind of like that gives you that confidence, and that gives you that that sense of pride going into the summer and the spring and all that stuff. Like, we ended on a high note, we'll be back on a high note. So yeah, that bowl game 100% makes a difference. I don't care what bowl game you're playing in, what stadium, that bowl game, it sends you off on the right path.
Recently, there was an interview done with Miami of Ohio's quarterback, Brett Gabbert. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to see that one or not yet. But they asked him the question about where the real Miami resides. And his answer was in Oxford, Ohio, not Coral Gables. I mean, how much of a slap in the face is that to our players who know that we are the real, I'll say it right out, we're the real Miami. I don't give a damn. We are the real Miami. And what kind of hunger does that put into our players when a quarterback from the opposing team is the one out there saying it? Go ahead, Eric.
Listen, those guys he's trying to get his team going, right? I mean, they're gonna grab everything they can to try to get their guys going. So listen, all this talk, we all make a big thing of it. After the very first play, everybody forgets about it. And you can run your mouth all you want, but after that very first play, a couple collisions, and you're out there thinking about getting your job done and not about what some quarterback said. So at the end of the day, I think, we can talk a lot about it. It's fun fodder to think about and talk about, but it's not going to affect the game. And it's college football, and I enjoy it. I enjoy the talk as much as anybody else.
I kind of figured once a player gets smacked in the mouth, everything changes pretty quick. Yeah,
the old Mike Tyson quote: "Everyone's got a plan until you get hit in the face."
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. When bodies, start to collide, and you've got a lot more to think about. You're trying to keep your head on a swivel. You're trying to make sure you execute. So yeah, there's a certain amount of jitters when you first get out there, but once you get that first bit of contact, you kind of realize where you are and what you got to do. I think the only time something like that comes up with our players is if they get a shot on them, and then they'll let them know. Okay. Like, if they get a clean shot on him and he lands on top of the quarterback, then he might have a little something to say, then. But other than that, it's all for the papers, all for the entertainment. Look, when game day comes, you got to show and prove. So, you said it, you got to stand on it, and we'll find out when the clock's hit 0.
Chavez, if you had a chance to sit down with this DB unit right before game day, what would you be telling them?
I would go back to the same thing that I said earlier, like just communicate, man. Communicate, because it's, like the coaches used to say when I was there, Coach McGriff, this is the greatest team sport. It is the greatest team sport. You got 11 people out there, and you've got to communicate. If you don't talk and you don't speak and everyone's not on the same page, I mean, Eric knows, especially playing one, offensive line. If one guy's out of place, that can blow up the whole play. So, I would just tell those guys, man, communicate, alignment, assignment, execution. Make sure you know where you're supposed to be. Do what you're supposed to do. Talk to your guys, and everything you practice. Now it's time to show it, man. I mean, I don't think that we're going to see a team this year that is just head and shoulders above us with players and like just so much more athletic. I don't think that happens, especially when you talk about a program of our caliber at the University of Miami and the kind of players that we get. So I think it just comes down to the fundamentals, man. Just get out there, communicate, and do what you're supposed to do.
Eric, same question for you, man. For the offensive line, of course.
Yeah, no, listen, it's funny when you think about whether it's the DBs, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's the running, technique and effort, right? At the end of the day, you want to see technique and effort. Are they doing what they're coached to do, and are they doing it in a manner that shows everybody that they want to be out there and they want to be successful, right? And I think that's what you're looking for. And again, this is, we used to say, everyone out there is on scholarship, right? Like, so to win every play is going to be pretty tough. But at the same time, you want to see the technique and effort. And so that's, again, just from an expectation standpoint, are you doing what they're coached to do? Are you doing it in a manner that is something that I think everybody that's wearing the jersey be proud of?
So to kind of just finalize it up all here and what you guys have said, Week 1, the keys to victory, defense, offense, either way you want to approach it. Chavez, Week 1, what are the keys to this team winning this game so we can get out of there with a Week 1 win?
I will go back to what Eric said, man. Just the execution, being crisp. Football comes down to execution. Yep. It's as simple as that. Can you get the job done? And I think Eric and I are saying the same thing, just in slightly different ways. But like, you're being coached to do this, right? So the coaches that you're being coached by, you're not going to go out in the field and see something that you haven't seen before. Football is football. It's the same, when you get to college, of course, playbooks and all that kind of stuff comes into play, but it's still football. If I've got to cover a guy, I've got to cover a guy. Cover 2 is cover 2. Man coverage is man coverage. So it's just about being crisp, communicating, executing the job. Like Eric said, man, give effort, proper technique. It all comes back to the same thing, man. So I know on the defensive side for us, and for me particularly, it was all about communication. Yeah. Because if we can all get on the same page and we know where everybody's supposed to be and what everybody's supposed to do, then I think that we're a hard team to beat. So just get out there, communicate, and execute.
I figure we're coming pretty much about full circle back because I know you guys have kind of answered this, but I just kind of wanted to have it summed up at the end just so it was in a nice, neat package. So, Eric, your approach on that.
No, listen, like it's same. Like there's nothing new here. Like again, like let's let's look like Canes are supposed to look like. Let's go out there and fly around, and like that. That's as simple as it is. It's like, let's hit, let's make sure. And again, more so than anything, let's play fast. Like that's again, it just goes back. Let's just play fast. Like offense, defense, play fast.
I want to see our athleticism, and I want to see it used properly. Honestly, that's one of the big things for me this season going forward. We've had athletes, guys. We've always known we've had athletes. But like Eric mentioned, we were trying to shove a square peg into a round circle for far too long, and it just ain't going to work.
You know, the one thing I will say too that I noticed, I think we got some more size. You know, and I'll be very curious to see how that matches up. I think for the front seven, you know, especially the front lines, I think are going to be, I think, a little stronger, a little bigger, and I'll be curious to see kind of how that matches up going forward.
Definitely. Now, my last question here for you guys, and I'll let you get on with your night. I won't make you go into score, but is this a win or a loss for the Canes? We're getting a W or what? What do you think, Chavez?
A W, of course.
W.
Absolutely.
That's easy. It's the easiest
3
question.
W's around, baby. 3 W's around. So we are predicting the Miami Hurricanes to win. I got us winning by about 10 points, 14 points in that range.
Okay. All right.
I think Miami of Ohio is about an 8-win team. This is not a bad football team. They lost their big playmaker on offense, though, and they're going to have to replace that. So we're going to have to watch out for that. But Miami of Ohio seems, and I don't know how they do it, but they always seem to have a fairly stout defense.
All right.
Yep.
Well, man, thank you guys so much for joining me on here. I didn't want to take you guys for too long tonight. We were already at 40-some minutes. I didn't mean to even keep you that long, but I truly appreciate you guys jumping on here the day before our first game. Let's go out there and get that W tomorrow, and let's stay in touch, guys, and we'll chop it up throughout the season.
Let's go, Canes.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it. Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Thanks, man.